Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on interviewing interns and how to find a great fit for both of you. I'm here today with Francisca Abbey of DEED, who is a Senior Grant Specialist for the Dislocated Worker and Trade Adjustment Assistance Office. And I'm Becky Siekmeyer. I'm the Program Director for the SciTechsperience Internship Program at the Minnesota High Tech Association. Before we get started on the content of our webinar, I did want to talk real briefly about SciTechsperience. This is a statewide, state-funded program that connects college students in science, technology, engineering, and math majors, also called STEM, with paid internships in small to mid-sized Minnesota companies. Well, why should that interest you? Because SciTechsperience offers a 50% cash match on your STEM intern's wages. This is a matching grant that reimburses you for up to $2,500 per intern. The program is free and provides a lot of flexibility, but companies and students do need to meet a few requirements to participate. You can review this information on our website, which is shown on the screen, scitechmn.org. And most importantly, we're looking for STEM internships in small companies. Companies located in the 7-county metro area must have 150 employees or fewer worldwide, and greater Minnesota companies must have fewer than 250 employees worldwide. It's definitely not too late to get on board for the 2016 program year, but you don't want to wait too long. We have 100 matching grants remaining as of today on a first-come, first-hire basis, and we expect to run out of grants by the late May. You can learn more and get started on our website or contact me with any questions, and I'll repeat my contact information later in the webinar. All right, let's talk about internships and interviewing. Internships have the potential to create really positive win-win situations for both employers and students. Students, of course, are looking for hands-on experience that will help them apply what they're learning in the classroom to real-life situations. This kind of experience is a tremendous asset for them as they finish their degrees and head out to look for full-time work after graduation. Interns can help employers boost productivity by accelerating a project that's been on hold, or maybe by freeing up full-time staff to work on special projects. Interns can also bring fresh perspectives and insight to your team. Internships are a great way for companies to develop future talent and for both parties to try before they buy, meaning to see if this would be a good fit for longer-term employment. Through my work on the SciTechsperience internship program and from conversations I've had with many employers and students, I've learned that interviewing is really a learned skill for both students and employers. Many small employers wear multiple hats and don't have an HR staff on board to help with the hiring process. But regardless of the company size, employers are looking for a way to maximize their time and efforts so that they find a good fit for their positions. That's what's brought us here today and why we're talking about how the interview process is the perfect time to find a good fit for both you and your student. Our guest today is Liz Sharif. She's the Director of Corporate Technology Talent Acquisition at Thomson Reuters. Liz has a wide range of career experiences working across multiple industries, from small nonprofits to large multinational corporations. For the last 16 years, Liz has focused her career on talent acquisition in the technology sector. She has great insight and stories on interviewing, and she'll share these with us today. Liz, thanks so much for being with us.
Good morning, Becky. Good morning, Francisca. Thanks for inviting me here today, and thanks for everybody for joining us this morning. Yes, I'm the Corporate Technology Director at Thomson Reuters. One of my key focuses is bringing in technology talent to the various corporate technology teams. Another thing that I focus a lot of time on that is very critical to bringing the right talent into Thomson Reuters is doing training with our hiring managers and interview teams on how to define and identify the right talent for internships, new college graduates, all the way up to executives. Another thing that I've been participating more in the last several years is going on to high school campuses as well as college campuses to train students on interviewing skills. So I've worked on both sides of that interview desk. As you move through your day, think about how often you respond to your environment in terms of the services and products you use. It's really a visceral response, good or bad. You stop for morning coffee, they're out of the dark roast at 8 a.m. and the barista is as frustrated as you are. Same scenario, but you walk in and the barista has your coffee waiting for you with a smile. Two different experiences. Human capital is the single most valuable asset of any company, large or small. They can attract or repel existing and new customers. They can make or break your business. One of the most significant factors that supports your career success and the success of your business is the talent that you hire and surround yourself with. A bad hire is very costly, so knowing how to be an effective interviewer so that you can recognize and hire the right talent will directly impact your success.
Thanks, Liz. Let's quickly review the agenda for today's webinar. We're going to look for how to find answers to 3 key questions that are shown here, and we'll review those again in a minute. We're also going to hear some expert interviewing tips, including some ideas for must-ask questions, questions you should never ask, and reading nonverbal cues. So, take it away, Liz. Let's talk a little bit about setting the stage before the interview.
So there's no doubt about it. Being interviewed is one of the most stressful activities there is. It's right up there with public speaking. But there's a lot of anxiety on both sides of that interview table. Oftentimes, interviewers are extremely uncomfortable in that role. The anxiety in an interview room is due, in part, from my experience, from a common imbalanced dynamic that can naturally set itself up between the candidate and the interviewer, and that is that the interview is a one-sided conversation where the candidate, through a series of questions, is being judged by the interviewer against some arbitrary criteria. Pretty intimidating. So the first thing I'd like to do today is dispel this common misperception about the candidate interview dynamic that can really have a negative impact on the outcome of an interview. So as the interviewer, I'd like you to consider when you walk into that interview room that you actually share the very same objective as the candidate, and that is to answer a single question: do we have a match? The candidate's objective is to find the right internship. Your objective as the interviewer is to find the right person for your internship. An interview is really just a balanced two-way exchange of information between the candidate and the interviewer to make that determination. The second factor that can cause stress and impact the outcome of an interview is preparation. Let's talk first about candidate preparation and how they'll be evaluating your internship opportunity. It's fair for you to expect that the candidate in front of you has prepared for the interview, that they've put together a wish list of what they're looking for in an internship. And this includes the experience they want to gain and the work environment that they want to be in. The questions they'll ask to evaluate your internship should map directly to their wish list. It's also fair for you to expect that that candidate has prepared to outline how their experience and skills aligns with the responsibilities and the requirements you've listed on your job description. Now, let's talk about preparation for the interviewer. So how will you know if you found the right candidate? You have to know what you're looking for before you go out to the marketplace to find it, right? This requires a certain amount of preparation. First, you need to define the objective of the internship. What will this intern accomplish in X number of weeks? This will be clearly outlined in the job description under responsibilities. Second, what skills, experience, and qualifications will candidates need to successfully deliver on those objectives? This will be listed in the job description under requirements. An important thing to note here is the need for you to be realistic in defining the deliverables for your 3-month internship and the related experience you're targeting in candidates. Students, by the nature of their circumstances, are at the very early stages of their career, and their experience will reflect that. So in summary, a mindful, balanced approach along with good preparation are really key to conducting an effective interview and hiring that right talent.
Excellent points. All right, so let's start looking at those 3 questions that we want to make sure we get answered during an interview. And the first one is, does the candidate have the experience and skills to be successful in this internship?
So again, your candidates will be students, so a majority of their experience will be gained through academics, projects they've worked on. They may have also gained some valuable experience as a research assistant, a teacher's assistant, or other summer internships they've participated in. Experience they've gained through extracurricular activities and volunteerism, as well as awards and recognition, are also valuable. They may have done some independent work like building a mobile application on their own or competing in a hackathon. All of this counts. Because their experience is limited, a majority of your interview question should focus on potential and the invaluable soft skills they've acquired. That will support their performance as a valuable individual contributor and a team member, as well as their commitment to contribute and learn. So 4 soft skills that I focus my discussions on with interns are solid work ethic. So do they take ownership of their work and responsibility for their actions? Do they show up on time? Do they keep their commitments? Do they own their achievements and mistakes and learn from them? The second soft skill that I focus on is teamwork. Are they a good collaborator? Are they good at resolving conflicts? Are they mindful of how their work impacts the goals of their team? Are they mindful of the bigger picture? The third soft skill I focus on is leadership. Have they gained experience as a mentor or a coach or a tutor? Have they led activities or projects? And the last soft skill that I focus on is communication. Have they had experience leading meetings, giving presentations, developing reports? What you really want to focus on, are they able to communicate ideas using different methods? So some of those must-ask questions you want to include in your intern interviews are, ask them to highlight some experience they've had developing those leadership skills, those teamwork skills, those communication skills. Talk about any time that they've took ownership of their work or responsibilities through specific actions. Ask them to tell you about a time when they made things better. And I'll focus a little bit about this question and how it's framed. Everyone on this call is in the business of delivering either a product or a service. The reason you hire people, whether they're interns or full-time employees, is either to increase your efficiencies and cut costs or other savings opportunities, or to increase the number of customers that are buying your products or services. So a fair question to ask your interns is to ask them to give you examples of the ways they've made things better by being in an internship or a full-time opportunity. Have they increased customer satisfaction so there's a spike in business? Have they cut the time to close down a Dairy Queen, and so that's a cost-saving measure? These are really great questions to get at what we're talking about.
That's great, Liz. Thanks. You know, I've been thinking about this as you've been talking, and I have a question about sort of this idea of asking either experience-based or hypothetical questions. So it's kind of a two-part question there. What is the best way to phrase an experience-based question? And secondly, as you mentioned, we're dealing with very young workers who don't have a lot of experience. So what's another way to get more at their thought processes if they don't have experience in the area you're asking about?
Well, that's really a good question, because to your point, as I mentioned earlier, these students don't have a significant amount of work experience. But one of the things that you'll want to do is build out scenario questions or hypothetical situations so that you can get at how they think about and solve problems. So a question that I used when I was interviewing a candidate who had a management job at a Dairy Queen over the summer, and I was trying to get at leadership and just managing a somewhat awkward situation. And the scenario was, you're 20 minutes away from closing. You know that you're not going to be able to close on time because the line of customers is stretching around the block. the person you're supposed to partner with who's going to help you close has just asked you if they can leave a little bit early because they want to get to a party at Saturday night. How do you manage that situation? So what you're looking for in their answer is, how are they defining the problem? Is it the friendship that they want to preserve? Is it the closing that they are targeting? Is it trying to figure out how they can preserve that work relationship as well as make sure that they're delivering on that closing time? So you want them to be able to identify the problem, understand how they approach resolving the problem, and then what they anticipate the outcome would be. So that's an example of a scenario question that would help you get at, not necessarily experience that they have, but how they think about solving common problems.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to the second question we want to make sure to answer, and that is, does your internship align with the candidate's educational and career objectives?
So again, remember the candidate is evaluating your internship against that wish list that they've prepared. They will focus their attention and questions on making this determination during the interview. A great question to get at what's on their wish list is, tell me about the themes or motivators that have influenced your academic and work career so far, and how does this internship fit in with all of that? This is a great question to draw out that information, but also to draw out their self-awareness and their communication skills. It's really important that they're able to articulate their story and relate that to your opportunity. Listen very closely to the candidate's answer to this critical question and be prepared to articulate how your internship opportunity aligns with what they're targeting and how you'll provide that bridge of learning for them.
Excellent. All right. Earlier you mentioned that people are understandably pretty nervous during an interview. So what advice do you have for getting an introvert to open up? How do you put them at ease and get them to really share their thoughts?
That's a really good question, and I would have to say, and I'm going to speak in generalizations here, but given that I focus on hiring technology talent, it seems that this particular talent has more instances of introverts. So really relevant question. So part of what I've already talked about as far as building a framework for the interview actually puts candidates at ease. So during the first couple minutes of an interview, I'll introduce myself and talk a little bit about the balance of that situation. I reassure them that we have the same goal, and it's to identify whether or not we have the match, and that it's as important to me to get answers to the questions that I have to identify the match as much as it is for me to provide them with the information they need. So establishing that balanced conversation with the candidate right out of the gate really has a positive impact on bringing their shoulders down from around their necks. So I would suggest that more than anything, just setting the right framework so that they're feeling comfortable.
Great, thanks. The third question that we want to cover is, does the candidate fit in with the culture of your company and your team?
It's a really good question to focus on a very, very critical part of identifying the match. So the day-to-day responsibilities of a job are important, and you'll be focusing your interview on whether the candidate will be able to perform those. However, the context in which they do that work is as important, so be prepared to describe that to candidates. I would say that 9 of 10 candidates asked me to describe the culture of Thomson Reuters in that first discussion. So what is your company's culture? Some of the things that you can talk about are as simple as, what are your work hours? Is it an open or fixed schedule? What is your dress code? What is your specific management style? What's the culture of your team? Do you have a predictable or dynamic environment? How do you feel about employees' use of social media during work hours? These are all things that you're going to want to describe and be prepared to answer those specific questions from candidates. So a key question to understand what they're looking for in a cultural fit is to ask candidates, what sorts of things do you need in your work environment to support your success?
Awesome. We have a question from Jennifer. She says, we have a small company and don't have an office. We work from our homes. Is there any specific thing we would need to think about when talking about our culture?
Well, one of the things that comes to mind immediately is a big part of your culture is staying connected through alternative methods, whether it's Skype or WebEx or other technologies, to make sure that you're working as a team. So that's something that you will describe as a critical point in the culture. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that interns seem to be most comfortable in internships where they have more face-to-face contact. And I think that's mostly because of the learning element that's inherent in an internship. But what you'll have to find out from the candidate is whether or not they're comfortable and or have experience working with remote team members. If they've had that experience and they're comfortable with it, that will be drawn out in that interview. If they have a preference to be in a brick-and-mortar office environment where they can shake hands and high-five or meet face-to-face with their team members in the same room, that's something that you'll want to learn early on as you determine whether or not it's a cultural match.
Right, great. Jennifer says thanks for that. That's what she was looking for. Next, let's move on to, we've talked a lot about what you should ask, so let's talk about some things that you shouldn't ask.
So I'll only spend a few moments on this, and then I'll provide a link for a site that will get you to some more detail and more information. The state and federal laws make discrimination based on certain protected categories, like the ones listed here, as illegal. So any question that asks a candidate to reveal information about such topics without the question having a job-related basis will violate the various state and federal discrimination laws. So as a general rule, and you'll be A-okay if you follow this, is make sure that all of your questions in an interview map directly to the role's responsibilities as well as the requirements that you have listed on the job description. So I'll just take a couple of questions that I commonly hear interviewers ask that may reveal some subconscious bias. So what country are you from? Now, if you've got a candidate that has an accent, this may seem like an innocent question, but keep in mind that it's illegal because it involves national origin. If you have a position where you cannot hire individuals who require a visa, employers can legally inquire about their authorization status and if they are authorized to work in a certain country. Another question along this same vein is English your first language? It's not the employer's lawful right to know if a language is a first language or not. But if proficiency in a specific language is part of that position's requirement, it's okay to ask the candidate what other languages they read, speak, or write fluently in. Another question that is common, particularly when people are trying to break the ice with candidates as they're walking from the lobby to the interview room, is, do you have children? So the employer may ask candidates this question as a way to confirm a candidate's available time commitment, but this question is actually inappropriate. If there is a specific shift that you need this candidate to be available, for instance, a 3 to 11 shift, it's okay to ask the question specifically around their availability during those shift hours. It's best to be direct about the requirements and get to the information you're looking for rather than to ask a question that is inappropriate, like do you have children, in order to kind of get the same information.
All right. I have a question about this. So what do you do if a candidate begins to volunteer information on these kinds of subjects, either before, during, or after an interview? What should you do?
That's actually quite common, and it's important that you communicate to the candidate when they share that information that what they're sharing will not be taken into consideration on the hiring decision. So an example I was recruiting a software developer for a position in New York City. The candidate was within a commutable distance, or what she felt was a commutable distance of 2.5 hours. And so when we talked about the need to be in the office 5 days a week for certain hours, she volunteered that she had a 2-year-old daughter that she would be taking with her, but she should be able to find daycare during those work hours. So I needed to kind of segue the discussion and thank her for sharing that detail, but to confirm that that detail was in no way going to influence a hiring decision. So it can be awkward, but it's really important that you identify that the information shared that's inappropriate is not impacting the hiring decision.
Okay. We have a question from Rob. He says, our company is trying to increase our diversity within the tech organization. Is it legal to focus on hiring / increasing certain dynamics such as gender?
Well, at Thomson Reuters, all of our employees share a goal of increasing both the retention of female technologists and hiring female technologists. So that goal is legal. There's nothing illegal about it. But what it comes down to is the hiring decision that is made. You can absolutely increase your efforts to advertise your position at, women's specific organizations, or develop marketing materials or branding materials that specifically would attract female candidates. But when it comes down to making a hiring decision, regardless of the different diversity categories any candidate falls into, you're always focused on hiring the candidate that meets the criteria as it's outlined in the requirements and, the role and responsibility. So it's hiring the candidate that will perform the job the best of all candidates.
All right, great, thank you. So far we have focused on what people say, but we can actually learn a lot from someone's body language and other nonverbal communications. What are some things you should watch for in an interview?
Really good question. So how prepared and serious you and the candidate are will come out during the interview by what is said, but also through nonverbal cues. So let's start with preparation. Is the candidate on time? Are you on time? Now, the time thing is a stickler for me because time is a valuable commodity, and neither the candidate nor the interviewer should ever give the impression that it's not. If anyone is running late, they should make this known before they are late. So one of the things that is kind of funny, my offices are situated overlooking the visitor parking lot. And so when we see that a candidate is cutting it close, we always go to the window and look at the parking lot. And we've seen individuals running across, putting ties on, putting suit coats on as they're rushing to make the bell of, when they're supposed to be in that interview seat at 1 o'clock. They don't leave themselves a lot of time. So this can also be the case with the interviewer as well. If the candidate has taken the time to arrive 10 minutes early, is in the interview room, and you walk in 10 or 15 minutes late, it doesn't put the interview on the right foot, and it kind of establishes an imbalance. So my recommendation is always be prepared and make sure that your nonverbal cues represent that. The second piece is around dress code. As a general rule, what candidates wear should not distract any attention away from what's being discussed in the interview. This also goes for the interviewer. You're representing the best part of your company. Some of what I've seen interviewers wear needs some improvement. I had a interviewer come into the interview wearing a black Metallica t-shirt, and that interviewer actually spent a majority of the interview time talking about the heavy metal concerts he attended in the 90s. Can you imagine the position that put the candidate in and what their impression was of that interview, that interviewer, as well as the company? Not the best. The other piece is around listening skills and body language. Is the candidate fully present during the interview? Is the interviewer fully present? Are you establishing eye contact and giving eye contact back? There's nothing more distracting than having someone fixing their gaze on your ear or looking over your shoulder. Another thing is, where is your smartphone? Where is your media and your technology? You should never see or hear a smartphone at any time during the interview.
Well, so what kinds of nonverbal information can you get out of a phone interview?
Well, that's a really good question. And because of the way that we conduct our business in this day and time, a lot of conversations take place outside of that face-to-face, so a lot of time on the telephone. And nonverbal information can really come through on a telephone interview. In general, you should conduct interviews over the phone where there's no background noise, barking dogs, running water, traffic. I've had people conduct telephone interviews when they're in the middle of traffic in LA, and one of the things that I'd ask them to do is reschedule the interview with me, because you can't have somebody's full attention when they're on a freeway, and it's not safe. Another thing that you want to make sure that you're listening to in that interview is the telephone interview is the candidate really listening to the questions? Because there aren't a lot of physical cues, there is an opportunity for you to really pay attention, state your questions very clearly, but also really pay attention to whether or not the candidate is answering the question that you actually asked.
Okay, so you know what my favorite story is that you have about phone interviews.
Oh, here we go.
Come on, share it.
I need a news story. So this is a true story. It's a little bit unsavory, but I had a telephone interview with a intern candidate and rang the phone. He answered it. I asked him if this was still a good time, just to confirm that 1 o'clock was an okay time. He asked me to hang on just a minute, and then I heard a toilet flush.
Wow.
Didn't hire him.
That's too good to make up. Yeah. All right, well, we have a question from Katie. She says, kind of along these same lines, any thoughts on Skype interviews for students that are far away? She's wondering if there is anything different for this type of interview.
You know, when geography is a challenge, I'm a full supporter of other means to have that face-to-face experience. Skype is a good option, but sometimes the connection isn't really good. Another option is Google Hangouts. But I think the important thing to note here is that it's really important to have some sort of face-to-face interaction. I don't think I've ever hired anyone without having that, whether it was in the same room or through telepresent or Skype or Google Hangouts. I think that there's a big miss and a potential to make a mishire if you aren't able to lock eyes with your candidate and pick up on those nonverbal cues.
So there's one other question from Cher. She says, is it appropriate to do a technical screening of some kind, given these are interns, or should we be focusing only on the questions presented today?
So if I understand your question correctly, if this is an internship with a technology group, they'll be working with a technology group, so you're requiring that they have some level of experience in technology. Focusing part of your interview on their technical expertise is 100% appropriate. Now, there might be another question that you're asking as a part of this, and I'm not sure, but I'll address the use of technical assessments or tests. And so, again, if finding out their expertise in a technical area is being done through an assessment or a test, that's another way to go about it. But one thing that I'd caution is that you avoid using homemade tests or assessments. in order for you to evaluate candidates fairly and consistently, you need to use tests or assessments that have already been confirmed for validity as well as reliability. And you'll also need to have people trained to evaluate the results of those tests in the same way. So oftentimes those tests or assessments are purchased out of the box where other people have made sure that they're both valid and reliable measurements.
All right, very good. I know that you wanted to do a quick summary of some of the things we've talked about today.
Yeah, so just generally speaking, an effective interviewer follows a consistent, well-structured format that keeps the interview on track within a set time and provides each candidate a fair chance. Also, an effective interviewer is well prepared and organized. And if you do this, this will build both your confidence as an interviewer, but it will also put the candidate at ease. So be prepared, understand what the role is, what the responsibilities are, what you're targeting in your candidates, you know, how it links to your team and the broader objectives of your organization. Make sure you provide that context that I've mentioned several times and frame the interview up as a two-way balanced conversation where you're sharing information. Also being professional and consistent. Remember, questions are relevant to the position, they're non-discriminatory, and they are asked consistently of each candidate. Be observant, be actively listening throughout the interview to what is and isn't being said. And finally, be objective. There is in all of us, because we're human beings, sort of this unconscious bias. You know, whether or not there's an unconscious bias around leniency where you're rating all the candidates favorably, or you're being overly stringent, so you're rating all of the candidates unfavorably, or there's this unconscious bias called central tendency where you're not differentiating between candidates. And there's also something that's called the halo effect, where one perceived good or bad attribute during the interview outweighs the entire evaluation. So if a candidate uses, you know, or has a verbal tic or uses one word over and over again because they're nervous, don't let these things kind of take you off the rails and become unfocused on what the task is at hand, which is to identify whether or not the candidate is a match for your position and evaluating everything that's shared in its entirety throughout that interview.
Wow, that is such great information. I've been watching the chat window here, and I have not seen any additional questions come in. So I think we're just going to go ahead and wrap up. This has been really an excellent discussion and some really great questions. We want to share a few resources with you. If you registered for today's webinar, you will get an email with a link to this deck and to the recording of the webinar. And if you didn't register, that's not a problem. You can just send me an email, which is listed on the screen. Liz has also provided a link, as she mentioned earlier, for legal resources. You can see that on the screen, and that will help you navigate some of those questions that you shouldn't ask. There's also a few resources for employers on the resources page of the SciTechsperience website, which is scitechmn.org. All right, so Liz, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insight. It is always great to work with you. And Francisca, thanks so much for helping us prepare the webinar today. And I'd like to thank everyone else for joining us. And if you have any questions, just get in touch, and have a great day. Thanks.